Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. It's great to have you tune in. Thank you very much. It's been a busy time. I seem to say that a lot, but it has been really busy as we get towards the very closing stages of winter, which for me, in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, we should know where I am now. But for me, it's getting really close to the end of the main repotting season. There are other seasons where I repot different types of species, but all in all, almost every one of my exotics now that has wanted to be repotted or should have been repotted has been done. And if it hasn't, I'm at that stage where I'm toying up whether to let them go another year or to repot them. And my advice is, if you're teetering on the fence, then repot them. But for me, I really like to push the envelope a little bit every now and then, just to, on the more mature trees, to really see what that extra year staying in the pot does to their fine, delicate growth. I've mentioned it before. Sometimes that's a bit of a poor decision in that I'll see some dieback or some issues or some weakening of the tree and I'll kick myself for it, but sometimes I see really good results. So I want to talk a little bit more about that as we start to close up repotting. I want to talk about post-repotting as well, what's going to happen with the trees now and some telltales that I use to look for things. And it's hard to say it, but spring's almost here, so I've got to start getting ready for spring. And I know it's a crazy thing to talk about as we get towards the end of the cold or the wet season or the cold period. But it's time to start looking at watering systems again and making sure that I'm on top of that. So let's get into the podcast. Some of the learnings that I've had throughout the repotting season, which I do, I do like to reflect back and look back on things that I've come across or things that I've done that I could have done better, and just that, that whole, I hate the buzzword, but the continual improvement side of things with how I am with my trees. And one of the things I do when I take the trees out of the pot, especially if it's been sort of that 3-4 year period since they've been repotted, I'm really super critical on myself when I look at the trees and how I secured them in the first time or how I put the pot mesh in, just crazy little things like that, how that was wrapped around the root ball, if there was a way that I could have done it better. And sometimes, honestly, I look at it and go, geez, you've learned a lot since then. And I know it's just tying trees into pots, but that's what I try and do with the trees, is I try and make sure that I always do it better, that I'm always giving it everything I can. And if there's a weak spot in how I'm doing things, then fix it. And it's not really hard. Like, it's just little things here and there, but I do definitely try and make sure that my focus is on that improvement side of things. And, I it was even at one point I was looking at the the pot mesh that I was using in the bottom of the pots, because as I'd go to cut the tie-in wires that were holding the pot mesh in there, they were fine. But I'd sort of get the wire and I'd cut it with my wire scissors that I use specifically for wire removal when I'm repotting, and I'd find that the pot mesh would tear, would come out very easily, and then I'd review that and look at it and go, oh, that was that batch that I got from such and such. But since then, I've upgraded and I've gone to this better quality mesh, and I know it's just mesh and it's designed to hold soil in and keep bugs out, but if you can do things better, it's the 1%ers. It's those little things that we do with our bonsai that make such a big difference over thousands of years, Anyway, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about was developing stock and the soil that you use for that developing stock. And I know this is a bit of a contentious issue because I hear it a hell of a lot, and I see it a hell of a lot where people will come in and maybe even, some people listening to this podcast will say, oh, yeah, I spoke about that with Scott. But when you develop stock, there's a belief that you can sort of throw it in anything because it's just developing, right? So there's no point spending really good money on a tree that's a stick in a pot. And I'd like to contest that fact and say, I think that the more that you put into the soil that you use on a potential bonsai when it's younger, the better that tree is going to be. It's going to be a million times better. You're going to have a great root structure almost from day one on this thing. Great root structure, as I've said, and as you know, Once you've got that solid base, then you can start to work up. Your plan that you put in place relies on the engine of your bonsai, of your tree, being as efficient as possible, and putting it into a not so perfect soil mix for years just simply delays the development of that tree. And it's a constant thing. How do I develop this tree faster? How do I get from here to there? What's the fastest way I can do it? And let me tell you, fastest way that you can possibly do it is with a really good engine. A good engine comes from good soil. So no matter where you are, the soil mix may vary to what I'm using. That's fine. But whatever the best soil is that you can use at the time for your developing stock, the quicker you are going to develop that stock. And the saving that you'll make when you have a tree going into substandard soil or secondhand soil or whatever it is that you think it's okay to use, it's not that much of a difference. When you look at the value of you might buy it in bulk, you might buy it by the bag, you might buy it however you buy it. When you break it down to that little pot that tree's going to go in that you're developing, makes a massive difference. If you've got thousands of them, yeah, of course the cost is going to go up, but think about it in 3 or 4 years' time, what you want to achieve. We talk about the goals, the planning, all that stuff's really super important when it comes to your trees. What do you want this stick in a pot to look like in 3 or 4 years' time? Do you want it to have a really nice trunk and nabari and then be able to start working on your primary branches? Or do you want it to look pretty similar to what it is now with an ugly root system that when you take it out of that pot to repot it, you're going to have to cut most of that root system off. You take away the tree's strength, and then you've got a year or two building that root system in the good soil that you finally want to put it into before you can start developing the primary branches. So you're behind the 8 ball for time when it comes to developing your stock. So I'd really encourage you. That's one of the big things that I've learnt the hard way myself over a lot of years is the sooner you can get that stock, those cuttings, whatever it is that you're working with, into the best possible quality soil that you can afford or that you have access to, the better it's going to develop. I always talk about the ideal, the pinnacle of whatever it is that we can do, where you fit on that sliding scale, whatever your best is that you can access it, you can do, that's the best. Doesn't mean that it's the perfect thing for the tree, but it's the best that you can offer the tree. So if you can only get access to potting mix in a bag from a hardware store, and then the sort of opening or the particle size that you can put in there to open it up is scoria, then if that's the best that you can offer, then do the best you can offer. Like, it's going to give you a better result than just going straight for a soil mix out of a bag. If you can only access soil mix, then get the best possible one that's the most open possible mix that you can use for that tree that you've got in front of you. Don't not do something because you can't get the very, very best, and I hate to say what the very best is because it's not always accessible to everybody, but just do the very best that you can with it. But you're developing stock, no matter how young they are, they will massively gain an advantage, and you will shorten the time to develop those trees by getting them in the best possible mix that you can as soon as you possibly can. All right, so the other thing, if you are not going to repot, but you're teetering on the edge, like I talked about a bit earlier in the intro, which I definitely am. And I know that the clock's ticking for me, and I've got a really short window now where I set as acceptable for myself to repot certain species. And I look out my workshop and I see some really advanced mature trees that are big, and they are going to be difficult repots, and that's not the reason why I hesitate on repotting them. It's more that I'd really like to slow the growth down. I'd really like to get some real refinement into these trees, because the repotting process is going to invigorate everything and push it on and make it super aggressive for a little while. If I'm not going to repot those trees, the thought that goes through my head is you need to then do something. If that soil feels like it's really compacted and it's really hard, and you're 50-50 on repotting these things, you've got to do something about it. And what I tend to do is It's something that I normally do in autumn for trees that are struggling, that probably should have been repotted that weren't. But it's a process called soji, which is you remove gently with a root rake the top portion of soil in the pot. So, let's say it's the top 10, 15, 20% of the soil out of the pot itself. You gently rake through the roots, so you're not aggressively chunking out massive amounts of root there. You're just taking out some of that old soil. Then the process that I use is I'll get something like a screwdriver or something like that and put into the soil and then sort of aerate it all the way around. And then I'll get new soil mix and I'll top up the soil, put sphagnum moss over it, and it provides a new area for some of the roots to grow. I've aerated, so then when I water, I allow the water permeate that solid central root ball. But it may be, if I'm in doubt, like let's say I'm probably 60-40, 60% I should repot, 40% no, let's see how this goes, then I'll perform that task. I will go through and I'll scrape off the top layer, I'll top it up again, and I'll say, okay, well that'll buy me another year. But I've got to be bloody certain, like absolutely certain that it's the best thing for the tree to do. If I start to teeter over the next few days from this, and I know that window for me of repotting is starting to close rapidly, then I will pull the trigger and I'll get on and I'll repot those trees. So it's just another trick that I have up my sleeve, up my arsenal, that I can use to make sure that I'm going to get the best out of the tree while still maintaining the health of the tree. And that's the thing. That's when I get really angry at myself, when I get through summer. I get to summer, in a few months' time, and the heat really starts to rise, and I'm coming down that other side of summer, and I start to see the stress that's been caused on the tree because I didn't do what was best for the health of the tree. That's when I get angry. So, and disappointed with myself, to be honest. So that's all those thoughts, all those years where I've made mistakes, where I haven't done it, and I've pushed it too far. I've got that on one side of my shoulder, and on the other side, I've got it where it's worked, and the trees look magnificent. It's really taken that massive quantum leap forward to becoming a highly refined tree. So I've got those two. Every time I look at these couple of trees, these big ones, and think, should I? Anyway, that's just me. So that's my best advice for you. The other thing is, as I go through and repot, as I come towards the close of repotting and I've looked at trees that I've changed or upgraded pots, or I've just, done something with the tree where it's gone from one container, one vessel to another, it's time to put the pots away that I haven't used in my potting shed. And my best advice to you is put them away carefully. Put things away, whether it's your tools at the end of repotting, whether it's the end of season cleanup that I'm going to give them in a couple of weeks' time. Always make sure that you put things away as you want to find them next time. And if you just stuff pots into a cupboard or into shelving or whatever, and you can't see what's in there, then you'll never know. And next time you'll have to take everything out. It'll be an absolute nightmare. Whereas I find it's almost therapeutic to go through now and put timber spaces between things, get things set up right. So next time when I'm repotting and I go, actually that tree would look better in that pot, and I know I'll put it away in here somewhere, I can go in there, find it, and I can retrieve it. So it's that good housekeeping that as you come to the close of the seasons, the housekeeping becomes more and more important. So anyway, maybe it's just my OCD when it comes to this stuff, but it's the best advice I can give you is leave things as you want to find them. Righto, so you've repotted and repotting season is finished for you, all gone well, you're happy with everything, and then what? Then what do you do? Like post-repotting, what should you expect? How do you handle your trees? What's your procedure for things? And as we get towards growing periods, but it's still cool, what happens with watering? Like, is your watering increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it staying the same? Are things wet? How do I tell what I should be doing? And that's really a common question, I suppose, that I get asked. Or it's like looking at my yard, like this tree to that tree, like, are they the same? Should I treat them exactly the same way? When do I start fertilizing? What happens now? So Post repotting, what to expect. I've made notes on this because it's something that's really super important. Your trees are, without being dramatic, your trees are vulnerable after repotting. And don't forget, this podcast is how I see the world. All right. And this is how I think about my bonsai and how I treat them. And I treat them with great care and consideration. And I see them as, once I've repotted them, I see them as vulnerable. And it's my job to now protect them to ensure that they can do the best they possibly can. So while it might be a bit over the top considering, your trees in this manner, it works. It really works well for me, and it means that my trees can keep taking steps forward and they can keep developing, which is the main thing. You keep taking those big steps forward in your bonsai journey because your trees are doing the best they possibly can. So after repotting, you've got to protect them from exposure to harsh elements. Okay? So it's not just one thing you've got to protect them from, it's multiple. And the main ones that I keep an eye out for is frost. It might not be an issue where you are, but for me, definitely frosts are an issue. We've had a really nice warm patch lately. The overnight temperatures have got up to double digits, thank God. And you're starting to feel that, wearing shorts is becoming the norm again. And, you got that spring in your step because the grass is growing and the birds are cheeping and, everything's looking great. But then all of a sudden you get this frost warning. Hey, overnight, that's going to get down low single digit figures, frost warning in these areas. You can't be blasé with these things. You've got to make sure that you protect your trees. When they get repotted, it gives them a bit of a kick. They start to push, those buds start to open up, the nice fresh little foliage comes out, but their root system is still developing. You've gone and you've hacked off or you've cut off or removed a certain amount of the roots off that tree. They're vulnerable, they're exposed. So the buds are pushing, the roots are starting to grow. You don't want that thing to freeze. You don't want the roots to freeze. You don't want the foliage to get burnt with the cold. So you've got to protect them. And that means putting them under shelter, bringing them under a carport, bringing them under eaves of the house, bringing them under shade cloth, whatever it is, you've got to shelter them. And if you don't have shade cloth, let's say the tree's massive, which I'm certain people listening to this are going, well, I can't move that tree, so it's staying there. One little trick that I saw when I was over in Japan was they would take trees that were delicate and too large to move, that weren't under like some kind of retractable shade cloth area. They would take shade cloth out and put it over the tree and sort of tie it around the base, so loosely around the tree so it didn't do damage. But I thought that was a great idea because it shelters those inner areas, all the buds on the tree, and you can have some kind of wire framework or something like that, but it doesn't need to be over the top. It's just go out there as the sun sets, put it over the tree, frost comes, does its damage, walk out in the morning, sun's coming up, remove it, put it away again. It's really, really simple. It's really easy. It's something that is not going to break the bank to do. You don't have to have, complex structures concreted into the ground to do this sort of stuff. You can just throw them over the tree and protect it. And you look at the value in so many ways of your bonsai that you've got. The cost of the temporary shade cloth and your time to go and do it once every now and then post repotting, and you might only use it 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it is. It's not going to be a permanent thing. It's nothing. It's bugger all. So I would strongly suggest that when it comes to that, if you can't move the tree, that's a really nice little tip and trick to do it. So with bud burst comes root growth, fires up transpiration. Okay, that word again, it comes around all the time on this podcast, and I use it almost every day of my life in the bonsai world. But it's so important to understand and get a grip on, because your watering frequency will increase as the tree starts to take up that water and the engine starts to get going again post dormancy. So where we've been in the past, we're watering, every 3 or 4 days, whatever it is. It's now suddenly you look at it and go, well, is it every 2 days? Is it every day? Is it twice a day? I don't know. That's up to your tree. That's up to your environment. That's up to you to work out. And one of the little telltales that I use is by putting sphagnum moss on top of the trees. I've talked about it before. It's a great telltale to let you know when the trees are taking up that moisture. as they take it up, it goes from that orangey colour to a white, and you can visibly see it. So I'll look at a bench of trees. Example, I was walking around past the pines yesterday, and they've moved from indoors to outdoor sheltered to then back onto the bench where I've got retractable, I've got shade cloth that I can use. I've got an area where I can protect them. So they're out in the open and they're exposed now. And I'll look across that bench and I see, 40, 50, 60 trees that have been repotted. And I can see very clearly the 5 or 6 that need watering because they've gone dry. And I'm finding that it's the same 5 or 6 every day now that's starting to dry out a lot faster than everything else. And, when you inspect those trees, when you're getting close to them, you see the buds are starting to move as well. Like they're starting to push, they're starting to stretch out a little bit. And it's like, well, okay, you're miles ahead of where that tree is beside you that's still staying wet. That's not taking up the water. The buds haven't started to move, so I don't need to water that one. So if you're using an automated system, which, you may have to, I have to. It's not a dirty word, using an automated watering system, but you've just got to be careful that you're going to be giving water to trees that don't need it. So those roots are going to stay wet, and then you're prone to some sort of an issue, especially when you've repotted to those cut roots that haven't maybe healed over just yet. So it's a consideration you've got to take where you may have to use an automated watering system, but it's better if you can hand water and spot water the trees that need it as opposed to just flooding the water onto absolutely everything. Again, that scale of what the best thing to do is in the world for your bonsai and what you can achieve that's the best, automated watering system might be the best that you can achieve. Go for it. Don't knock yourself out. But when you can hand water and you spot water those ones that just need it, you'll get a far better result than just flooding water onto absolutely everything. So you've got increased water uptake in some of the trees, and it's hit and miss as to what's doing. And it may change day by day. You might find that trees that haven't been watered, maybe for 3 or 4 days, tomorrow they're dry, and then the next day they're dry again. So they've joined the party. They've come on board to need that watering increase of frequency. So post repotting, what to expect? You've got a shelter. You've got the mobile shade cloth structure that you can use. You've got an increase in uptake of water through transpiration on the trees. It's time to be aware and to be ready, because you can get easily caught out by saying, I've only ever watered every 2 days or every 3 days. That time now when we do get that warm weather, which is starting to peak around the place, a few of the other states around Australia, Adelaide, 24, 25, whatever it was, it's beautiful. Bring it on. I love it. But then you look at the forecast and it's teeming down with rain. So just a daily check on your trees will make such a massive difference to the successful transition from repotting to spring growth. Once we get to spring and things start to take off, it gets a bit easier because there's a far greater consistency. So let's get in the next section of the podcast where we talk about spring preparations. Every day on the first day of spring, my dad, it's his cotton socks, sends an email or a message to the entire family saying, with the poem, spring has sprung, grass is riz. And we now expect it. My whole life, for, 50 odd years, I've heard the same thing. And we expect it. So much so that my little sister will sometimes get up very early on the first day of spring and send it to everybody saying, haha, beat your dad. So what I'm getting to is that spring comes, we know it's coming, and being prepared for it with our bonsai makes such a massive difference. You can't say you get caught off guard. It happens every year. Every year of your life, you know that it comes. And like with my dad sending this message, when it's not being sent anymore, I'll miss it dearly. I love him for it. Anyway, with spring comes growth. With growth comes certain things that we have to do and certain responsibilities that we have. And I am using this period now to prepare for fertilizing and making sure that I have my plans in place for my trees. So if you're listening to this and you go, I don't know what Scott keeps rabbiting on about repotting for. I've done my trees. They're all done. I've done the 10, 15, 20 or whatever they are, or however many trees that you've had in your collection. They're repotted. You've got a bit of a gap in your scheduling. Let me tell you that you've got to get on to preparation for spring now. You've only got a couple of weeks left, really, before everything starts to take off. And I just get the feeling in Melbourne when the calendar says, okay, it's spring now, the weather goes, yeah, okay, cool, it's spring, and flicks a switch, and things start to change almost straight away. We've had a bit of a lead up to it coming into it now. So if you've got a bit of a lull in your scheduling, even if you don't, I think it's something that you need to prepare for now. There's certain things you need to acquire or get into a position where you can start using it. So for me, I am starting to fill fertilizer bags, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things. It's amazing. I think my repotting numbers now are, it's got to be, I've lost count, but it's got to be in the 400 something mark, including customer trees and whatever else. And my fertilizer bag making is up around the 450, 500 bags for the first sort of batch that I need to put together. So it takes time. So I've got to allocate time in my schedule to do it. You may not have anywhere near that amount to do, but it means that you should have it done. Get it done. If it's only a couple that you need to do, don't leave it too late. Maybe prepare for all of spring. Once a month, if you are using, I'm assuming you're using tea bags, you may not be, but if you are using the tea bag fertilizing method, don't forget, it's really simple. It's once a month you're putting tea bags onto the tree. So you're only going to really do 3 batches of fertilizer per tree. Work out roughly how many bags of fertilizer you're going to be putting on the tree based on what you want to achieve from the fertilizer. And fertilizer, I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again, and ratios and predictability and what you should be doing at what stage of the tree's development. That's not for now, but I would be filling bags like crazy because you can always store them. You can put them into Ziploc bags so they don't stink out the garage or the workshop, or hopefully they're not in the kitchen pantry, but you can store these things and not use them. I would make sure that you are on top of it. The second thing that comes with spring for me is a growth plan. I need to make sure that I know with the trees, what do I want to do? Because it's so easy when you've got a number of trees to get into automatic pilot and just go out there and just start cutting everything. But I need to make sure that I'm really focused on my trees and look at them and go, what has to happen to this tree? What's the plan with this tree? Do I want to increase ramification? Do I want to thicken branches? Do I want to work on the trunk? What stage of development is this tree sitting at? And I'll try and separate them or put them in areas and go, okay, well, don't forget that one. You've got that sacrifice branch that you want to grow. So, you're pruning and you're pinching this part of the tree, but you're letting this part of the tree take off and grow. So I'm gearing myself up. I'm like the coach talking to the players before the match. You got to do this, you got to do that. And then when spring gets here and it's off and racing, that muscle memory is there, or that memory is there for me to say, just make sure that you're not being stupid about this because you want to take that step forward, and don't do something and then suddenly go, oh, damn it, I didn't mean to cut that. That was meant to stay that little bit longer. So with new growth comes that other nasty word, that the contentious word is pests with your trees. There's different ways to handle it. I get that. And whatever your plan is, however you want to tackle pests, all I'm saying is that you need to be prepared for it. If you're using a natural remedy, get on it. If you're using a chemical-based remedy, get on it. Make sure you've got supplies of it. If you're using a preventative measure with regard to spraying something before they become an issue, then just make sure that you've got that ready to go. And like I said, it's just a matter of sitting down with a pen and paper, making a list saying, okay, spring, what do I need? Okay, you need to buy that. You need to buy this. You need to make sure you got that. Do you have everything? Tick the boxes. Yes. Okay, no, I don't have this one. I don't have tea bags, or no, I don't have blood and bone, or no, I don't have that spray or that fungicide, whatever it is. Make sure that you've got it ready to go. There's a few trees that I have in my collection that have this sort of ongoing leaf curl issue with them. Not a major thing. It's something that I manage. But part of that management process for me is to spray the trees with a copper-based fungicide just prior to bud burst. So I keep those trees on a high watch list, and I look at them and go, I don't want to do it too early, but I definitely don't want to do it too late. So I've had to make sure that I'm prepared, and I've got the chemicals that I need to do it, that I've got eyes on the trees as well, so I'm ready to go. There's one that's a twin trunk maple, and the two trees are different varieties, unfortunately, and so one comes into leaf before the other does, and it's the other one that's got the leaf curl issue. So I've looked out there, and I've been out there this morning of recording this podcast. I've looked at the younger one, the smaller one, and it's burst leaf, like its buds have opened. So I'll look at the other one and go, it's probably another couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days before I have to spray this thing, because it's getting ready. So now it's becoming more frequent in my mind to say, hey, make sure you stay on top, get ready to spray, because there's been years where I've missed it, and the tree pays the price for me being a bit lax with how I've looked after it. So I'm very mindful that I give it absolutely everything that I've got. But I'll go back again. I just want to swing back to the planting stage, because that's the most important part that you've got. Look at your trees, and when spring gets here, harnessing that growth, that initial growth that the tree gets, can either make or break your bonsai. Just going in and pruning everything off means that you're not going to get thickening, which means you'll get lighter growth. If that's the goal, perfect. That's what you have to do. If you want thickening of the trunk, if you want a branch to get thicker, if you want something to get longer, then you can't just prune everything. And your plan may be that, okay, I want this to grow, I want that to grow, and I want that to grow. How do I just get those 3 things to grow? It's simple, by pruning the rest of it. The tree will push resources to those areas that are left alone. So you just have to make sure that you're very clear on what you want to achieve. Now we've been through you're getting to the end of the repotting stage. Now you're getting into spring. It's what do I do? Okay, I've got to be prepared for this. And that's it's that old Boy Scout adage, those that are prepared are going to do a lot better than those that get caught by surprise. And having a plan for it and reviewing the plan will make sure that you can, and your bonsai more importantly, can take that next step. But your bonsai journey is going to be so much better for it. Well, thank you, bonsai lovers, for tuning in. I appreciate every single person that listens to this podcast. It's always invigorating for me. When I look at the stats and how many people have listened and downloaded and are continuing to grow and listen to this podcast, it really inspires me to pick up the pen and plan and write down and give tidbits of information that will help. Not everything is going to be for everybody. I accept that. But if you can pick up something along the way that makes you smile a little bit more, that makes your trees a little bit shinier, makes them grow a little bit better, then that's great. That's awesome, because enjoyment of bonsai is what this is all about. That's why you listen to the podcast, hopefully. Hopefully it's not because I help you get to sleep at night. Hopefully it's because you gather something out of it that's useful. Please keep reaching out to me. I love it. It's something. It's like a community service thing that I do, where I try and help as many people as I possibly can. And the feedback that I get post these issues is really nice too. Knowing that we've nutted something out together, you and me. We've worked on an issue with your trees, and they've got to the other side of it, and you're happy, and you've got an extra batch of knowledge about how to look after these things. That's awesome. That keeps me smiling. Please keep listening in. There's plenty more to come. There's a long way to go this year. We're up to season 6, episode 32 for the year. So there's a lot more to come. Anyway, thank you as always. I love you very much. Keep looking after your trees. Keep giving them those little cuddles and making sure that you're ready for what they're going to do next. And keep pushing them to the best they possibly can be, as well as the best that you can possibly be. All right, until next time, happy bonsai.